somebody that I've always wanted to actually have him to speak, Mr. Peter. He was around for the West Africa Young Leaders Conference, a professional conference, but we weren't really able to really hear him very well. But today we have him today, and he'll be speaking on transformational leadership. And the great part is the fact that he is the head of um, the youth leadership in Kenya, Government School of Government. So it's a great privilege to have him here today. And without wasting too much of our time, we're going to let him have the floor, and then we're going to learn from him. Okay, so have your pen. I have my pen here with me already. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you so much. And I think you're a way of always putting me to these important discussions that I think is very crucial when it comes to issues of leadership and where the continent of Africa is really heading to, especially the focus on young people and how far the young people can go when it comes to learning about leadership and how they can emulate leadership, from modeling leadership to learning from those who are there before us. So it's a very important topic that you chose, and perhaps a timely one for that matter. Transformational leadership is one of the critical foundations of leadership that I feel are supposed to be impacted throughout the development of leadership from whichever age, could be as low as from primary level to tertiary level, because I feel like it's an aspect of collaboration and partnership is something that is supposed to be growing together jointly with someone who is willing to learn. And especially if you look at in the context of providing guidance, aspirations, and influence. I mean, a transformational leader is that particular person who is willing to motivate, who is willing to empathize, who is willing to walk the path, who is supposed to give themselves as a model of an examples of study, who have dedicated their lives to be emulated, to be as clean as Scarton. This is an individual who is dedicating their lives to leave a better legacy for any nation. So I feel like this is very critical for us to look at this chapter and see how do we model transformational leadership to young people, and where are some of the examples of leadership that we can actually learn from. Who are these leaders before us who have demonstrated transformational leadership? Because when we talk about transformational leadership, we mean that we are growing with whoever we are working with. In an organization level, you are a motivator. You are going beyond just getting results from people, but also understanding who these people are. You are an individual committed to set high level of standards. You are giving yourself as an example to be learned and studied. So transformational leadership is a very timely, like I said initially, and I do believe that is a practice that will perhaps even motivate those we feel that cannot achieve so much in their lives. It's an area of igniting potentials, it's an area of investments that will transform organizations from just normal organizations to extraordinary organizations. When it comes to nations, these are leaders who will propel the nation to a bigger picture, where we say that we are getting it right. A transformational leader is less corrupt, for instance. This is a person who is not found in, wrong places. This is a person who is not greedy, who's not looking for personal gains, but is really willing to leave a strong legacy. Because the transformational leadership is squarely on the legacy of the next generation. So these are some of the things that perhaps I feel like are very necessary to take us through some of the areas. So I looked on some areas that perhaps I needed to object on. Of course, we have talked about transformational leadership is a leadership approach that causes positive change in an individual and organization. The key part of it is inspiring, empowering, and developing followers to reach their full potential while working together. So those are some of the things that are very relevant at this moment. Now, some of the core characteristics of transformational leadership that we need to learn is visionary thinking. This is a person who can clearly communicate, inspires others, and this is a person who is looking at long term, before or after. He has to be an inspirational motivation, means that he's an encourager, It creates sense of meaning and task. Intellectual stimulation. This is a person who promotes creativity and innovations. Is a person willing to really walk the people through a lot of innovations. He encourages questions and of course challenges status quo. These are people who are willing to embrace new solutions. These are people who are focused on mentoring, coaching, and supporting team members. These are leaders who are giving themselves up for learning. So I do believe all these kind of scenarios will create what we believe is transformational leadership. Thank you so much, my brother Miracle.
Oh, thank you so much, sir. So I'm really grateful about that. And so there's a very important question which I believe that a lot of young people do really want to understand. And then the question is, what is the role of processes and process in transformational leadership? And by this, what I mean is, so a lot of young leaders today want to see results, yeah, and
Yeah.
they want to create a balance between how do we stay on course and on track. And it feels slow, but at the same time, we believe that, okay, transformational leadership takes time because it goes beyond just seeing results. So how do young people, you know, handle the role of process, and what's the role of process in transformational leadership?
Um, you see, there are two ways of looking at it. If the foundation was created for transformational leadership, means that if, let's say, if you are working in an organization that previously had already built these structures of transformational leadership, then it takes a very short time to really achieve it. Even nations, if the previous leader was a transformational leader, it might have put very strong foundations that can actually just need a continuations of processes. But you realize where institutions, organizations, countries, places where there were none of this transformation, and previously there were anarchy, there were transactional leadership, there was dictatorial leadership, there was, a crosscut, then the process is a bit longer. So depend with the previous leadership that was in place is what determined how long the process could be. It could be shorter, longer, depending previously. For instance, in Africa, I think we are at a foundational level. So there are so many things that we need to learn that actually, if it requires starting from the bottom, because we are struggling with emulating what leadership really is and how it encourages the future generation, the current generation, the Gen Z of current moments. You see, they find it very difficult to understand delivery of processes. They see things to be opaque, if I can use that word. They sometimes doubt the processes, they doubt the institutional infrastructure, they doubt the current leadership. They are more looking at how best can we able to do things differently. And that's why you realize, for example, in Kenya, we have Gen Z issues, and some African countries are also questioning what is the current leadership like. See, this same goes to organization. A young person goes to organization that perhaps do not embrace mentorship and coaching, do not embrace succession planning. Now the processes become a bit longer, whereby your skills, your innovation is not really taken serious. But if you go to organizations that already these infrastructures, structures, institutions have already put this in place, then the processes become shorter. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. So another question is, and that's in, we have a lot of young people that are encouraged by your profile, they read your profile, and some of the question is, how do you measure the impact of youth development initiative in Africa? What do you think there should be a metric for measuring youth development initiative in Africa? Or I mean, it's just all about just talking and just talking. How do you think it should be measured based on your experience as being a youth leader?
Um, how do you measure the impact of initiatives operated by young people? I mean, the most critical part of it is a process like what we started off. Is, for instance, for you realize that if we were to put, let's give an example of an organization. If you build structures, both legal and infrastructural in place, then it's easy to measure impact. You see, we are looking at, are young people willing to reorganize their thoughts in a more structured way, engage all the legals and professional processes in place, ensure that yes, we are starting small, but we are continuously seeking to learn something. We are seeking collaborations, partnerships, we are seeking mentorship and coaching, and then we are using the same knowledge to build our organizations, our initiatives, our movements, our civil initiatives, or even if you are doing corporate, are we willing to go the extra mile to make sure that we are being mentored? We are going through a strong apprenticeship processes, and we are accepting that some of the lessons we are learning, we are putting them in a more structured way so that it's easy to measure so much. Because one of the things that I struggle a lot is to find systems that are not perhaps thought through properly. Because what I will encourage young people is to think about attracting more processes of learning, best practices on how to run initiatives. Then put structures in place, ensure that they are getting mentored, they're being coached, they are learning the ropes. You see, for example, they're mirroring success corporates or initiatives that are already structured in a manner. So, to me, it is a process that must be visible in nature, must be legal in nature, must be in line with already stipulated framework of operations, so that if you are to match it and grow it, for example, let's talk about a startup. A startup is an initiative or something that young people can start, but then they have to go an extra mile to build the infrastructure around it. Scalability is very critical. Whichever initiative you have, you must think about how do we scale. Then we talk about commercialization. How do we able to really attract value for anyone to invest? How do we attract people to put their resources in place? How do we make sure that we are accountable to the small resources that we have, and we are willing to be as transparent as possible to ensure that whoever is investing in us has very clear vision? Our organizations, as small it is, we must have things like strategic plan. We're talking about mission, vision of the organization. It has to be very clear where the organization is going to. The mission has to be very specific. The vision has to be very clear so that whoever put the resources on it can invest. And through that, you realize that it takes a period of struggle, but meantime, if you are really keen enough and disciplined enough, yes, we will measure impact. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Peter. And then there's another question which I mean, it is on my mind, and I believe that as Africans, we were struggling with leadership, and leadership in especially in the political landscape. And I believe a lot of young people are disturbed, especially from the leadership that's coming from the political landscape. And so my question is, young people that want to engage in transformative initiative to encourage change, to motivate other young people, where they have government policies or how will I put it, governmental agencies that act like blockage towards those transformative initiative that young people want to actually bring about. How do young people manage challenges like that, especially challenges that come from the government?
Um, I think one, every government, I think, using an example of Kenya, for instance, there has been a very deliberate and intentional, clearly stipulated structures that support young people. They could be either through affirmative fund, they could be through trainings, capacity building, and furthermore, there are those policies perhaps that support youth-led businesses, at some point. But then for you to access all these things, there has to be a bare minimum of you, for example, registering your initiative. And the charges for young people, I think, in Kenyan context was lower at some point. And most of these things have gone digital, at some point. So what I find it very interesting is that until we young people have to sit down and study some of these things, perhaps consult, ask questions, ways of running these things to make sure that yes, the policies, regulations are there, but they are actually some of them favor the young people. I haven't seen tax holidays or things, but then, for example, registration of businesses, the prices was minimized at some point. It's a little bit low for young people, I think. But then, if you're a young person thinking about doing a big business, you have to be willing to actually invest a lot of resources to see these businesses grow. We will not shy away from saying this is too much policies, lengthy processes, and we give up. Someone somehow you have to try your best level to really engage professionally, walk to those offices, engage with the officers, using the context of care. And you will serve. That I can guarantee you. I haven't seen any young person who has really followed these processes and will stand out. This is what I can say for now. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Mr. Peter. Thank you so much. And I think it's sometimes very sad that oftentimes young people of our generation were used to probably force. We used to we're not really used to negotiating. So, and I think that's like a very big problem when it comes to young people of our generation. And another area that I'm looking forward to is how do you believe? I think right now Africa is in a wave of change where a lot of things are looking like it is going bad, it's getting better, and then we're striving, and a lot of young people somehow are feeling like they deserve more, they want more. And I think young people sometimes are even asking these questions. I've had a situation with a lot of young people, especially in the context of Nigeria. We have a lot of young people that are tired, and then some people keep saying, "Do you believe that?" you know especially Africa that are experiencing issues with leadership. Do you believe that Africa one day will truly experience a system of leadership that, people are not feeling restricted by any form or feeling that the governments are antagonizing them? Or do you believe that Africa will truly experience a system of leadership which will make everyone feel belong? What do you think about that?
Um, I'm a Pan Africanist, and of course, I think in the year 2010, I met Muammar Gaddafi. I was in Libya. I have been to a good number of African countries. I think during February I was in Europe. I think I visited a good number of African countries, and some of the youth I was with are actually from Nigeria. I mean, we might be going through very dark moments. Let's put it that we feel that it's not very clear where the place of young people is. I mean, give it to Africa. Africa is purely youthful population. You see, now there are quite a number of young people that struggle to see these opportunities coming because one, I do believe that we are not producing enough to cater for the interests of African young persons. Countries are not investing a lot to really place young people at the cornerstone of development. And that is the suffocation, the betrayal. A good chunk of young people who have gone through universities, who have gone through tertiary education, are feeling that there's so big barrier on top that they can't see the light. But the truth be told is that there are those who are really pushing through their spaces. And I can tell you, in less than 10 years, African young persons will realize their full potential. I see it across the countries. I see the agitations. I see the uprising in so many soft uprising, hard uprising. There are those platforms. But critically for me, I see opportunity for young people to be engaged, especially in a productive environment. You see, where their full potential. I mean, Africa is not pushing for young people to be politically active, but the desire is how do we push for economical active? How do we push for young people to be productive in their areas of potentials? There are those who must go to politics, they must go. There are those who must build their careers in other sectors. So the challenge that is there, this huge demography is finding very hard to really live by. When I say live by means opportunities are very rare, careers are limited. There's no very clear, tangible blueprint you can tell me that is being put in place to really offload these young people. You see, so the agitation for young people is is valid because you expected once you clear some tertiary education, you expected to get a job, and now those jobs are limited. But when it comes to politics and leadership, the countries are struggling. I mean, when anytime I was in Cape Town, I think last month, and one of the things that we also see is a struggle of young people as well. How do they get their voices? Yes, we are skilling these young people to do what? You know, we must address the needs and spaces, opportunities for young people. We must think about building those industries, for instance, infrastructures. Miracle, this is a really it's a very tough time, especially for this youthful population, and perhaps it's high time we had a conversation to think about what are some of the industries, how do we leverage on the opportunities of young people, what is the career volume of young people in Africa. I mean, it's really a lot of thinking through. But I am positive we'll get results soon enough. Less than 10 years at most. Thanks.
Wow, wow, thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. So, and this question is quite very, I mean, I feel like this question is a bit really tough, but
Yeah.
and that's because as Africans we are religious by nature, and I believe every human is religious by nature. And looking at the problems we're experiencing in Africa, we see that religion plays a role in our development as a continent at the same time as individual nations. What would you say is the future of religion and transformation of a nation in Africa, especially in Africa? Do you feel like in few years to come, is either people are going to, I mean, have more reference seeing religion as the savior, or you believe that people really have to renew their mind to understand how to use religion to transform their nation than rather seeing religion as something that would really transform our nation?
Uh, Miracle, this particular topic is normally emotive. It depends who is looking at it. Um, I don't know if you are religious. Perhaps I struggle in that line. But anytime you listen to religious leaders speak, I mean, they sound more of looking for opportunities than delivering people to one to what is it called to heaven. It's more. I mean, look at African religious leaders. I mean, these guys are something special. I mean, they are slow to question problems that there is. They are engaging politician in a very special way. I mean, it is when the study was done in Kenya about the safest place institutions for young people, religion was not one of them. Universities, institutions of learning was considered a safer space for young people. I think the religion might not really address the needs of Africa, if you tell me. I mean, if you're very keen enough, I mean, when I visited a number of European countries, I think religion was the last part of development. I mean, most of them hardly go to church, even starting meetings with the prayers, even as we didn't start with the prayers. So, but how do we strengthen our spiritual growth? I think that's very critical. How do we know place of God in our lives. I think that's very critical. But when we look at the leadership in terms of spiritual leaders, we will throw the young people off the balance because they see. I mean, we are at a generation where people can see what is happening. We you see collaborations and between churches and politics. It's very connected. I mean, you could tell politicians every weekend are in churches and they are speaking more than this. In fact, if you look at the number of people going to churches, they are more listening to waiting for politicians to speak than what the pastor is saying. I mean, so this is an area that I might request that I'm not very good at it. I also struggle to study how possible this could be. Thank you so much, my brother.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. I mean, you were able to create like, a point there, and I believe a lot of young people would really understand this role. And I think it's a challenge, especially in Nigeria right now, where we have a lot of people looking onto religion as a savior in such a way that we feel like the problems we're experiencing, it's just only prayer that can solve it. And then in a way, we see that we've been praying for so many years, but it's not really forthcoming. So the question is it that we're not praying the right prayers, or probably, we're not really doing the things we're meant to do even after making the prayers. But thank you very much for that. So we have two questions more before we to let you go, and the first question is, what's your definition of transformational leadership in the context of Africa's challenges, success, and then everything that makes up Africa? How would you define transformational leadership to suit Africa?
Um, I mean, miracle. But I love what you do. I mean, to me, this is transformational. I mean, giving opportunity for young people to really learn something is transformational. I mean, I wouldn't base transformational leaders to politics. That I will be lying to anyone who thinks transformational leadership is coming through politics. There are ways to measure transformational leadership, and one of them is not through politics. It is through men and women who go out of their way to set times, to set opportunities to help someone. And that you can't find in politics. I think that politics is a game of what is the next election vis-a-vis what is the next generation. I mean, if we were to look at, for example, the Agenda 2063, maybe perhaps, how do we make sure that Africa Union is, and that is a conversation that I think we need to have with the leadership of Africa Union. Maybe we need to travel to, or we need to have that conference, or whatever it is with Africa Union, and perhaps say, if you are putting Agenda 2063, is it on the basis of transformational, whereby we are building infrastructures of motivation, mentorship, succession planning, preparing young people to take over the next sort of leadership. Are we willing to do that? Because when you talk about transformational leadership in the current African dispensation, we will find it very difficult to fix young people in that portfolio. Young people are called up to fit in rather than to be co creators and to specifically learn traits one way or the other. I do believe that such moments are yet to come. There are signs that they're actually embraced in some context of African countries. We are seeing youthful employment, useful appointments here and there, but it's not clear once they get to those political spaces, are they being mentored to take up the next leadership? But the other leaders that perhaps are doing it, corporate leaders, preparing young people for something, like what you mentioned, I've visited some churches, perhaps that you see they are really building some youthful engagement towards empowering the young people in Africa. Corporates are doing it. Maybe perhaps community leaders, people like yourself, maybe myself, at some context. So transformational leadership, I think, to me, must be very intentional and deliberate if we were to see results towards it. But the fact that we are playing politics with it, I don't think we are building that momentum. So it's a whole structure that we really need to push through and see perhaps how best we can able to do these kind of things. So it's not very clear to me, and I'm sure to you as well, how best politicians are doing it. But there are a number of leaders, some politicians who are really investing in the future of a generation.
Wow,
Thanks, my brother.
wow, wow. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Peter. I mean, you said something, and then I think you said young people are called to fit in than to be co-creators. Wow. And that's really, really powerful. Thank you so much, Mr. Peter, for that. And I think that's what a lot of young people like actually also deserve, and that's what we believe we need. And thank you much for making that point. So our last question before we let you go,
Yeah.
and the question is, you've worked with a lot of young people and you've traveled at least across Africa and across the globe. What's something you have discovered that you believe it's unique and that can actually help Africa young people get better? And what advice would you want to give the people, Africans, young people in Africa?
Um, what I've seen work in other countries is that the place of work has been well defined for growth. You see, it's very clear in terms of career. There have been very intentional investment for the job opportunities, succession planning per se. Some of the countries have put very good plans to really onboard young people. So what I see is, for example, I've seen a clear investments in terms of youth startups programs. These youth-related enterprises are really looked up in terms of investment. For example, when you see, for example, Israeli Kenya investment, you realize that the people who came from Israel are purely supported by their government. But if you find Nigerians in Europe, it is pure intentional of the Nigerian young people who have really gotten themselves to the global market. So the governments are not being intentional in marketing youth-led businesses. If we engage and find put a pool of resources that will jumpstart youth-led enterprises, youth-led startups, and of course market this product as much as possible. Maybe find ways young people can given tax-free to build their programs, and of course help them come up. So to me, what I've seen work is direct investment to youth-led businesses and intentional guidance to see this business being commercialized to some aspect. Not through just words, but intentional resources injected into the youth enterprises. Yes, my brother.
Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And so, what's your advice for young people? What do you want to tell people, young people? What's the last word you want to tell a young person listening to this right now? What's something you want to use to encourage a young person?
This is what I must say. We are not at the age of giving up. I mean, if you follow stories of men and women who have really made it, including ourselves as an example here, we really came from dark bottom plains of struggle. But that small light of hope that keeps pushing you through is what will ignite your potential. True success lies within ourselves, not without us. So we must continuously think of how best we can encourage ourselves before we seek people's encouragement. We must look motivation internally. Excuse me. We must look internally for motivation. And we must deliberately and intentionally look for support. I can tell you that for me to be where I am, including getting scholarship to universities, doing all these things, volunteering in organizations, that has been very personal. I mean, it is something that I drove. It was very clear in my mind where I needed to be. I have no godfather whatsoever. Grew up in the village, came back to the urban cities, pushed myself to understand few things, volunteered in government institutions, private sectors. I was seeking for people who can guide me through. So I will encourage young people not to. drown, drown themselves in sorrows and wonders. History will only remember those who did something a little bit extra. There are so many average people will discourage you from whatever you're doing, and there are so many of them. But in yourself, you will find your real motivation to what you need to do. I mean, to define your course of path, you must find it yourself so that you may get it. There will be challenges, and challenges are everywhere. If you look at, for example, what the other worlds go through, look at, for example, their climate, whatever they go through. I mean, it's so sad. Yet in Africa, we have abundance of resources and opportunities. Yet we have so many reasons why things don't work. You know, we are seeking for support throughout our lives, how best we can have our people, other people help us, than looking inwardly. And I think that has always been a challenge to our forefathers looked outwardly, our fathers looked outwardly. We are still looking outwardly for solutions. I think that is the weakest and the bad undoing that we are doing for us. So if we start thinking about how do we collaborate between enterprises in Nigeria and in Kenya, how do we have this kind of conversation? And thank you so much, Miracle, for that. So that we start motivating our young people in our smallest way possible. And I think we'll get there. Thank you so much, my brother.
Wow.
Always a pleasure
Wow.
to talk to you.
Thank you so much. Okay, sir, I'm so grateful, honestly grateful for taking time to actually be here. And everyone, also thank you so much for joining us. You can also follow Mr. Peter Quest on LinkedIn. Is it Mr. Peter Quest? I believe he has a lot of content that you would find very powerful, and then it would also as well encourage you. Thank you so much, Mr. Peter. I'm really, really grateful.
Always.
Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you so much, sir.
Thanks a lot, brother.
Yes, sir.
All right.